Hello. Hello, hello, hello. I hope you're doing well. Tonight's video is going to be another book video. What that means is that I'll be talking about books that I've read, books that I am reading, and books that I am looking forward to reading. I've been doing ASMR book review videos almost as long as I've had my channel, and they are some of my favorite videos to make, so go ahead and sit back, get comfortable, grab a tea, and let me know what you think. If you've read the books that I'm talking about, what did you think of them? And of course, I always love a good recommendation, so if you are new to my book videos, the main focus of them is really just talking about them in a relaxing way and tapping on them, making ASMR with them, things like that. So if you are looking for in-depth analysis, this is not that. So some of these books I haven't read, or I read them like 6 months ago. So yeah, no in-depth analysis, just really what I thought of them, if I recommend them, yeah, what I've heard about them, if they lived up to expectations, things like that. So without further ado, let's get right into it. I'm going to start with 2 books that I talked about in my last ASMR book video. These were on my to be read, and I read them, so this first one is called On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous, a novel by Ocean Vuong. I actually read this with my Discord book club, which you can be a part of if you join my Patreon. So if you actually do want to see more depth analysis and kind of participate in a book club, that's where you can find that. But we read this book like 6 months ago. I was really happy because everyone was kind of on the same page as me, where this was a beautifully written book. The theme and the premise behind it is really cool. Let me read you the back. Well, let me finish my thought. All that to say, I didn't like it as much as I thought I would. I found it to be a little flowery sometimes, and sometimes the metaphors just felt cheesy to me rather than useful and interesting. So yeah, I would almost give this like a 3.5 out of 5, even though I recognize that the author is very skilled. If you've read this, I am very curious what you think. So now let me read you the back. On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous is a letter from a son to a mother who cannot read. Written when the speaker, a little dog, is in his late 20s. The letter unearths narrates a family history that began before he was born, a history whose epicenter is rooted in Vietnam. At once a witness to the fraught yet undeniable love between a single mother and her son, it is also a brutally honest exploration of race, class, masculinity, and our current American moment. So yeah. This book came very highly recommended. It was very popular for a while with the critics. I love books that are kind of a cultural snapshot into a culture I'm not that familiar with. And so the perspective being from a Vietnamese immigrant was really interesting. It was just, again, I wish I liked it more, but let me read you just a random snippet. What do you call the animal that, finding the hunter, offers itself to be eaten? A murder? A weakling? No, a beast gaining the rare agency to stop. Yes, the period in the sentence. It's what makes us human, Ma, I swear. It lets us stop in order to keep going. And the author of the book, while the main character isn't exactly him, it is pretty autobiographical. The main character is also a writer, and so the theme of story and characters, plot, things like that come up in the book a lot. So yeah, so even though I didn't love this book, I still recommend reading it. I feel like you will either, well, just let me know. Like I said, no hard-hitting critique here. And it's obviously a very quick read. Alright, let's move on. Here is the second book I talked about in my last video. Watership Down by Richard Adams. Look at his very kind face. So I'm not going to talk too much about what it's about because I think I talked about that in my last video. But the summary is set in the rural landscape of the south of England. Watership Down follows a band of very special creatures on their flight from the intrusion of man and the certain destruction of their home, led by the doughty Hazel and his oracular, I think that's how you say that, brother Fiver. They journey forth from their native warren through the harrowing trials posed by predators, hostile warrens, and worse, to a promised land known to them only as Watership Down. So it is a journey plot archetype story, which I am such a sucker for in fantasy. And I was describing this to my friends as Lord of the Rings with rabbits. He created a society of rabbits that is very deep. They have folk heroes and their own language and history and religion. But they are just rabbits. I thought because they were rabbits, and because this book can be read by adolescents, that it would be very basic and I wouldn't enjoy it as an adult. This was a 5 out of 5 for me. I loved this book so much. Have you seen the movie? There's a cartoon animated Watership Down. I haven't seen it. I heard it's a little traumatizing because this book is surprisingly violent. The rabbits fight each other violently, get eaten by predators. And they tried to animate it into a kid's movie, and the result was a little traumatizing, I think. So I loved it. I'm going to be rereading it in the future. It was written in the 50s, maybe. So the writing is a little more old school. This author is clearly in love with nature and animals and England. The nature in England, because the way he talks about it, a lot like Tolkien. It's just full of love and research and description, a lot of description, again like Tolkien. So if you can't handle paragraphs of talking about plants and nature, it might not be for you, but I really liked it. Yeah, it's just an epic journey following a group of rabbits. It's suspenseful and funny at times, and I loved almost all of the characters. It wasn't as predictable as I thought it would be. So, let's do some page flipping. Even the way it was printed, I feel like you can tell it's an older book. I took off the dust jacket. It was being a little too loud. But if me saying that it can be read by adolescents turns you off of the idea of reading it, just know that I did not really have that thought the whole book, that this is for kids. I think it's just because it has talking animals as the protagonists. Yeah, I have nothing that smart to say about it, but this became one of my favorite books. And I'm not saying it's like a masterpiece of literature, but when you read a book and you love it or really don't like it, and you kind of know it's reflected by whatever you're going through in that moment or what you're interested in that specific moment that you're reading the book, how much that can influence your opinion of it. Does that make sense? Sometimes I'll read a book and I'll think, I would have loved that a year ago. But for some reason, it's not doing it for me this time. Anyways. So yes, I loved it. Highly recommend. So now I'm going to talk about some books that I've read that I did not talk about in my last video. You can probably tell by the time you've seen everything I've talked about, or if you've watched my other book videos, but I read a very wide range of types of books, of genres. I love fantasy. I love literary fiction, historical fiction. I'm learning to love nonfiction, but I will always be a fiction girly. Yeah, I'm also dabbling, and you'll see, into romantasy. We'll talk about that. But here is a fantasy book I read recently. It is technically, I believe, high fantasy because the main character is a goblin. And it takes place in a completely fantastical world, completely fiction, magical world with goblins and elves. Let me tell you how I found this book, because I think it was released in 2014, 2015. So it's not that new. So I've been practicing my own writing. I'm not that good, but it's fun. I read so much that I like writing. They're not always linked, but for me they are. And I was on the internet looking up people's favorite main characters in fantasy. And the main character of this book kept coming up over and over and over again. So I decided to read it to see what the fuss was about. The main character is the titular Goblin Emperor. And I had no idea what to expect. Zero. I thought it would be a more classical fantasy novel. It is almost 100% just court intrigue. So there's not a lot of action. There's no big wars that the kingdoms are fighting. It's basically one person learning how to become an emperor. Let me read the back. Born of a marriage made only as a part of a treaty, the youngest son of the emperor has lived his entire life in exile, far from his father and the imperial court. He knows little of the rituals of the empire. He knows less about the deadly intrigue that surrounds the government and the court. But when his father and 3 half-brothers die suddenly, Maya is summoned to take his rightful place on the throne. For Maya, life in the capital is a bewildering daily test. He is surrounded by strangers. He has no way to know who he can trust. And before long, he discovers his father and half-brother's deaths were no accident. So a really big plot point, without it being too much of a spoiler, is that he's a really good guy. He's a really kind main character. He always tries to govern from a place of forgiveness and kindness. I liked it a lot. I haven't even said what I thought of it. I really liked this book. I would have liked it more knowing going into it that there wouldn't be that much action, and I wish I had known that the fantasy world that Catherine Addison created is very complicated, because the story all takes place within kind of the capital, this royal court. A big part part of the story is just all the intricacies and the language and the words and the customs of the court. So probably like this far into it, I was like, when's something gonna happen? When am I gonna stop learning things and we can just get into the story? But it's kind of like the whole book is that. So, and despite that, I really liked it. Like, let me show you the beginning. Do you see that? That's the glossary. Those are all the characters and words and names to give you an idea. So yeah, this is probably only for the seasoned fantasy reader, I would say, maybe. It won a bunch of awards. Finalist for Best Novel, Best Fantasy Novel. It was nothing like miraculous or spectacular, but it was a good fantasy book. And it's also standalone. There's a second book, but it's not a true sequel. It's pretty much a standalone book. Some people like that, some people don't like that. I actually finished this wanting more, and I don't think there will be more, which is a little sad. But like I said, a very solid fantasy book. I was kind of waiting for something really bad to happen, because like in Game of Thrones or A Song of Ice and Fire, all the good characters, when they're really good, they always die or get killed, like Ned Stark. And I was just like, it's a really bold decision for the author to have a kind, almost naive character do well. You'll see what I mean. But okay. Moving on. So, I've talked about before that I have a technique for reading. I like to read a fun fantasy book or some sort of indulgent, fun book. And then I try to read a classic or a highly recommended book that you really have to sit with and think about. A classic, that kind of thing. And I'm not even going to talk too long about this book. I just wanted to quickly chat about it. What this is, The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. Famous. I can't believe I haven't read it yet, or I hadn't read it yet. Let me read you the side. I actually can't remember if I've talked about this book before in one of my videos. Whatever. Sylvia Plath's shocking, realistic, and intensely emotional novel about a woman falling into the grip of insanity. Esther Greenwood is brilliant, beautiful, enormously talented, and successful, but slowly going under, maybe for the last time. In her acclaimed and enduring masterwork, Sylvia Plath brilliantly draws the reader into Esther's breakdown with such intensity that her insanity becomes palpably real, even rational. So yeah, an American classic. I've heard people say that, and take this as you will, I've just heard this before, but Catcher in the Rye is to men what this book is to women. I haven't read Catcher in the Rye, also embarrassing for me, but the main character is relatable in a lot of ways, but also sometimes a bad person. So I loved 5 out of 5 the first half of the book. The second half, for whatever reason, I did not like it as much, even though I still appreciated her skill as a writer. Maybe it's even like the first 3 quarters I loved, and the last quarter I didn't really. It kind of took me a bit to finish it. So yeah. Let me read you a famous quote from this book, and I think you might recognize it. I pulled it up on Goodreads because I couldn't find it in the book. So here's the quote. I saw my life branching out before me like the green fig tree in the story. From the tip of every branch, like a fat purple fig, a wonderful future beckoned and winked. One fig was a husband and a happy home and children, and another fig was a famous poet, and another fig was a brilliant professor, and another fig was E.G., the amazing editor, and another fig was Europe and Africa and South America, and another fig was Constantine and Socrates and Attila, and a pack of other lovers with queer names and offbeat professions. And another fig was an Olympic lady crew champion, and beyond and above these figs were many more figs I couldn't quite make out. I saw myself sitting at the crotch of this fig tree, starving to death, just because I couldn't make up my mind which of the figs I would choose. I wanted each and every one of them, but choosing one meant losing all the rest. And as I sat there, unable to decide, and the figs began to wrinkle and go black, and one by one they plopped to the ground at my feet. So yeah, that's an example of the writing. Very good writing. Another book, just like On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous, a mostly autobiographical book, but not entirely, as far as we know. So yeah, the main character of this book is very heavily based on her own experiences. So yeah, it's a classic. I would give it like a 4 out of 5. Though I think someday I need to reread it and see what I feel at that point in my life. So this next one is a big one. It is romantasy, which is so popular right now. And my good friend recommended I try this one. It's called When the Moon Hatched by Sarah A. Parker. It's another romantasy with dragons, kind of like Fourth Wing. Obviously a very long read, but it kind of flies by. It's the first in a series, and my friend recommended this one to me because she said It was a romantasy, but with very good poetic writing. When I was looking into it, I actually saw that that was a critique of the book, that the writing was too flowery. There were too many metaphors. And so I honestly did not have that high of expectations going into this. I thought I would be annoyed by her writing. But I should have trusted my friend, because that didn't bother me at all. And I've read quite a bit from every genre, and I don't know. It definitely is on the more flowery prose side of things as far as modern fantasy goes, but it didn't really bother me. There were like one or two word choices or metaphors, similes that I rolled my eyes at a little bit, but honestly it's the good outweighs the bad in terms of writing style. I liked that it was a romantasy book that skewed a little more literary. I'm not a big romantasy reader, but it's fun to read books that your friends are reading, and I'm already really lenient with fantasy in general. I'm not somebody who really likes reading books with, they call it, spice. I'm not a big fan of that in any book. And that's a big element of these books, is that they are adult in the true sense of the word. Fantasy books. I even sometimes just like skip those pages, but anyways. I love romance though. I'm not saying I don't like romance. I think I'm just at heart a slow build romance kind of girl, and I like it when the romance is secondary to the plot or even tertiary. But in this genre, romance is right there with the plot. Because of the size of this book, the slow burn, I wouldn't call it a slow burn, but it was a little more slow burny than other romantasies I've read, which isn't many. Let me read the back. As an assassin for the rebellion group, Fyr Duoth, Rave's job is to complete orders and never get caught. When a rival bounty hunter turns her world upside down, blood spills, hearts break, and Rave finds herself imprisoned by the Guild of Nobles, a group of powerful fae who turn her into a political statement. Crushed by the loss of his great love, Gonvager took the head of a king and donned his melted crown. Now on a tireless quest to quell the never-ebbing ache in his chest, a clue lures him into the capital's high-security prison, where he stumbles upon the imprisoned Rave. So here are my thoughts. I liked it. It was fun. I read the whole thing, so that's a testament. Yes, I liked it. I liked the main character a lot. I kind of feel like this trope of bad girl assassin with big tough romantic interest guy who only loves her and hates everyone else, like that kind of, that's not exactly this, but I'm looking for my next romantasy book to read something that defies a few of those stereotypes, because I'm a little tired of them. Like, where's a male love interest who is funny, not just like big, strong, silent, you know what I mean? Or someone who's, I don't know. I'm seeing a little say I didn't like him. I'm just looking for something different now, I think. I actually didn't really like him in the beginning, and then as the book went on, I started to like him more. So, a big thing with this book, I would say, is there's a lot of plot twists, which is fun, more towards the back, but some good plot twists. Yeah, it was good. I liked it. I have nothing else really to say about it. If you're someone who reads a lot of romantasy, you're probably wondering if I've read any Sarah J. Maas. I read the Throne of Glass series when I was a teenager, and I liked it. I read like 3 or 4 of the books when I was a teenager. And then I tried reading, and you guys are going to be so mad at me if you like those books, but I tried reading The Court of Mist and Fury or whatever, like those books. Thorns and I don't know. I didn't really like them. My mom, sister, friends, everyone really liked them. I should give it another try. I just didn't really like her writing in those books. I was fine with Throne of Glass, but A Court of Mist and Fury or whatever, I just didn't like it that much, so I didn't finish it. I am thinking of reading them in Spanish. So, and I'm not even saying that this book is better than her books. It really just has to do with, like, if you're in the mood for an indulgent read, you know, a dramatic, fun romance, and I just happened to be in the right mood for this one, and not the right mood for that one at the time. So I might try again. Let me know if you think I should. Let me finish my tea. I always really struggle with ASMR videos where I switch back and forth from soft-spoken to whisper. It's like really hard on my voice for some reason. So I'm reading 2 books right now, which is very unlike me. I almost never read 2 fiction books at the same time. Sometimes I'll listen to an audiobook and be reading a physical book, but 2 physical books is very uncommon for me, but let me show you why. Like I've been talking about, I just got back from a 3-week family trip in Mexico to go see family, and I brought this book because it is big and yet small. Does that make sense? Like, for 3 weeks, I wanted a book that I could read the whole time, but I didn't want a big book in my backpack. So I brought The Once and Future King by T.H. White. Ursula Le Guin, who wrote the Earth Sea books. My brain is starting to get tired. We're like 40 minutes into this video, but she says, I have laughed at White's great Arthurian novel and cried over it and loved it all my life. And if you know her, I think she might be the big first epic fantasy female author. So very good praise from a very good author. I mean, this book is like the Arthurian novel, I would say. And I have owned this book for like a decade. And so I'm finally reading it. I'm about that far with a Band-Aid keeping my place. But do you see how beat up it is? I took it to the beach a few times and it just got destroyed. So I'm actually going to save really talking about this book until next time. The only thing I'll say is that I'm really liking it. It's a lot goofier than I thought it would be. But it is the King Arthur, Excalibur, Camelot, Merlin story. Written in the 30s. I don't even know, but I didn't want to talk about this one too long. I'm going to talk about the last book. So, my birthday was in the middle of this 3-week vacation, and my fiance got me a Kindle Paperwhite. So, because I was excited to have it, I've been wanting one for a long time. I went on Libby, the public library app, and got a book. I got a book that my friend recommended a long time ago that I knew nothing about, but it was available in the library, so let me show you that book. I started reading it just to kind of use my present, and then I got really wrapped up in it, and I kind of have not touched the Once and Future King in like 2 weeks, so I'll get back to that. But the book I am reading, which I'm still figuring out how to work this thing, is called My Dark Vanessa. Let me see if I can pull up the cover. Okay, figured it out. So this is My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell, a New York Times bestseller. So again, I had no idea what I was getting into. So the book is about a woman's relationship with a teacher. It has a lot of content warnings, which I didn't even know about going into it, and they're very heavy. It is a dark book, so you should know that. You should look up any, content warnings before reading it, potentially. But it is about this girl's relationship with a teacher and how it affects the rest of her life. It's complicated and dark and beautiful. It is beautifully written. The main character is an amazing character. Very complicated. I feel like I could know someone like this. Let me read. I read the disclaimer before reading the book, and part of the disclaimer that caught my attention was, so she says that it is a work of fiction and the characters and setting are imaginary. And then she says, anyone who has been following the news over the past few years has seen stories that suggest the narrative of this novel recast by my imagination. Into that I have worked other influences, such as critical trauma theory, the pop culture and post-feminism of the early aughts, and my own complicated feelings towards Lolita. So I read that, and I had no idea what the book was about. But yeah, it's Lolita, the classic novel, is reoccurring in this book. I am 80% done with it so far, and I had really mixed feelings on it in the beginning because it's really disturbing, and I wasn't sure if I liked how she was framing the situation. And I knew that as the book went on, I would hopefully be more comfortable with how she was talking about, the abuse. And it's It's really good. It is heavy and fascinating and beautiful. I don't think it's quite a 5 out of 5 for me, for no real reason. But yeah, it's good. I'm really, really liking it. It is a page turner for sure. And I really like her writing style. So I will have more to talk about when I actually finish the book. Like I said, I'm a good, fifth away from being done, but I am enjoying reading it. Okay, my dear. Thank you for joining me for yet another ASMR book video. And I hope you enjoyed it. I'm curious what you think of these books, if you have read them. If you read things by the author that you've also liked. Things like that. Okay.